Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. The first story, IT director was fired after my report. The second story, jerk-off manager acted like a jerk and ripped off old people to make himself look good. And the first story is, refused to provide accurate investment percentages and take me off reporting team? Enjoy being fired and losing equity in the business. I work for a very large financial company. Like the tech industry, occasionally we'll want to pursue market opportunities in areas we're not necessarily experts in, and it's much easier and faster to buy, either whole or a controlling interest, in a specialized investment company or advisor in order to acquire their talent, resources, and industry connections, commonly called an acqui-hire. Several years ago, we acquired a controlling interest in one such company. As an incentive to keep the talent on board and minimize disruptions to their business, instead of buying them outright, we bought about 2/3 of the interest, and the management bought the remainder. They then hung shares of that remainder over the heads of certain key managers as future bonuses to be triggered by performance and remaining with the company for specific amounts of time beyond the acquisition. The CIO of the company was one such employee. We shall call him A-hole CIO. This guy was a piece of work. He prided himself in having attended some university, I forget which, and felt that anyone without a certain title or hire was beneath him. He was used to being a big fish at his company, but didn't quite get that guys like him and his new corporate parent were a dime a dozen. I worked on the acquisition of his company and interacted with him fairly regularly, and while he was super nice with my boss, he never wasted an opportunity to be condescending to me, even though I was doing the bulk of the work. His favorite move was to refuse to answer my calls or emails, and instead instruct his secretary to reply on his behalf after I had reached out to him multiple times about the same thing. Luckily, his secretary was awesome, and in my honest opinion, probably good enough to have done his job. Anyhow, as a result of the acquisition, the company now had to report a host of different activities to the parent company on a fairly regular basis. One of these things was the percentage ownership of certain investments in a wide range of funds by a host of different entities. The thing to know is that as you invested in these funds, your entity acquired an equity stake that varied somewhat from reporting period to reporting period based on the performance of the fund and how much you were invested in it at the time. Unless the size of your investment changed substantially, the percentage variation in the ownership stake varied very little from one period to another. Still, those fluctuations had to be reported regardless of size. I tracked these for a host of similar companies owned by the parent company and had developed a reporting system that all of them used, which ensured detailed and accurate reporting. Everyone, that is, except for this company, which at the express direction of their a-hole CIO, refused. Now, I tried talking sense to the a-hole CIO, his analysts, and to his secretary, and in every case, he shut me down. Instead of supplying the information in the manner requested, he sent me an automatic performance summary generated by different software and told me to figure out the numbers myself, because his staff didn't have the time to change their methods and accommodate me. Of course, I went to my bosses with this, and their advice was that since this was a new company and we really wanted to build good relations with them while we were integrating them into our business, to just play along and try and play nice with this guy. In other words, make the best of it. Enter malicious compliance. I did exactly what they ordered me to do. Every single reporting period for a year, I took their crappy report, fleshed out their numbers as best as possible, and reported them, fully knowing that they were inaccurate. Every single time I interacted with their staff, I made sure to tell them this, and asked them to please use the system every other investment subsidiary was using. Every time they came back with orders from the a-hole CIO to refuse. Around that time, the a-hole CIO decided to grace us with his presence, and flies in to do a meet and greet with our team. My boss and I even had a one-on-one meeting with him. A-hole CIO comes into the room, greets my boss, and then proceeds to ignore that I'm standing in front of him with my hand out waiting to shake his. Even looked me in the eye, while proceeding to ignore me in front of my boss. I waved off his behavior, and time passed. About 6 months later, the parent company decides to audit their business, and what do you think they find? Yep, they find that all their equity and performance reports are off, sometimes way off. Of course, the president of the sub gets a call from my boss's boss, the parent company's CIO, and gets an earful. They in turn pull in the a-hole CIO and give him an earful about their reports. He immediately proceeds to throw me under the bus. The next day, I get called into my boss's office for a conference call with the president of the subsidiary, the a-hole CIO, and the corporate CIO. Right off the bat, the a-hole CIO starts demeaning me and demanding to know how I could possibly have effed up their reporting. The guy lays into me and demands that I be fired for the F-up. By now, I'm tired of this guy's BS, and I'm done playing nice with him, so I asked to be excused, get my laptop, and return. I then proceed to forward and quote email after email evidencing my request for compliance and his express refusal to do so, for a year and effing half. The corporate CIO thanked me and asked me to step out of the meeting. A couple of days later, my boss pulls me aside to tell me that going forward, the subsidiary will be reporting all figures as per my instructions, and the a-hole CIO had gotten the A-chewing of a lifetime by his and my bosses. However, while he agreed to comply going forward, he demanded that I no longer be part of the reporting process. My boss told me not to worry about it, that it was one less thing for me to worry about, and the a-hole CIO was just being vindictive because I had embarrassed him in front of his bosses. Fair enough, I passed the process on to someone else and enjoyed the reduced stress. I still had to interact with the company's analysts on direct investments, but I no longer had to interact with the a-hole CIO, which was fine by me. Fast forward 2 months, and I find out that a-hole CIO has been fired, and that it was his handling of my report that caused the corporate CIO to order a review of this guy's investments and reporting at every level. They found discrepancies everywhere, sometimes serious ones. It seems he had been fudging numbers in order to report better performance than he was actually generating, because he was not one of the initial equity holders, but was one of those managers who had been offered equity stakes in the company based on performance and longevity. His refusal to play ball with my little report ended up shining a light on his activities, which ultimately cost him his job and a very lucrative equity stake in the business, which was probably worth 7 figures. The next story is, make me quit the day before my birthday? Have fun getting fired. Quick background. From 2009 to 2012, I worked at a local quick lube chain. Oil changes in under 20 minutes, only using a trusted oil brand, etc., etc. Going into this job, I assumed that's all I'd be doing. Quick oil changes and the occasional tire rotation. I was wrong. Working for this specific chain, it's all about the extra services and products to bang customers over the head for that they might actually need, but not for double the price of the local auto parts store. Maintaining a higher average sale every month was very important for keeping your job. And just for reference, the district managers wanted all service techs to at least have a $60 plus average every month. A basic oil change was $35. On average, we would do anywhere from 20 to 50 cars a day, depending on the day of the week, in a 3-bay garage. It's also worth noting that if you maintained a high monthly sales average consistently, you were considered better than everyone else and put at the front of the line for promotions. It was also very common for someone with a high average to go from a tech to being a manager of their own store within a year. Yes, there was a high turnover rate. And yes, it was most certainly due to management consistently hiring drug addicts and not running background checks on people. Now starts my story. Over the course of my employment, I worked my way up to being a shift supervisor. This was one position below assistant manager, but I still held keys to the shop and had the alarm systems code. I opened and closed the shop regularly, and if I wasn't too busy with college, I could have been an assistant manager anytime I wanted. Managers I worked with loved me, and the district manager as well. It was honestly a fun job. Made a lot of friends working there that I still am friends with to this day. But then we got a new manager we'll call Johnny. Johnny was a D. Younger guy, 25 at the time. Thought he was hot SH, because he held an $80 plus sales average consistently since he started. Some people considered him a blessing because he helped other techs get their averages up too. Turns out he only helped them to make himself look better for raises and promotions. Here's a quick list of things Johnny did once he took over my store. Consistently disappeared while working for hours at a time to go walk around talking to the local college girls. Left every Saturday, the shop's busiest day, 3 to 5 hours early, and would have someone else clock him out at the end of the day. I soon discovered he lived in the next town over from me and knew people that knew him. Johnny, a manager? Last time I saw him, he was so coked up he punched himself in the face till he bled. He dropped out of high school and ended up living in the park for a while. How'd he get the job with no diploma? He was bipolar, so screaming matches and temper tantrums became a regularity. We had an employee that I believe had some form of autism, and Johnny would make him do dumb stuff because he thought it was funny. He dumped a mop bucket filled with dirty water on the shop's floor as soon as I finished mopping it, at the end of one day, because I peeved him off somehow. He got people that he didn't like fired by making fake schedules, showing they were off for 3 days straight when they were actually on the schedule to work. And when the employee didn't show up for the shifts, he would write them up in secret for a no-call, no-show for each day, but didn't tell the employees until they came in for the supposed shift and would fire them on the spot. If you want to argue, call corporate. And now my favorite thing he did often, that I walked in on him doing. Remember how I said he held an $80 plus average? Well, he did that by ripping off elderly customers, by lying to them about their cars, selling them services that either weren't actually getting done or weren't even needed, and selling parts that weren't even parts the car had, that could even be replaced, or just wouldn't be getting replaced. I discovered his little scam by getting stuck closing the shop, so he could go home a few hours early. I decided to use the time to go through the day's invoices and finding 2 huge sales on cars that I worked on. Only problem was that I didn't do any of the services on either of those cars. Heck, one of the invoices said the transfer case and rear differential were serviced. Those don't exist on 2011 Honda Civics. I then started watching the customers he would ring up and write down notes like the car, time, and customer. At the end of the day, I'd find the invoices and get the internal numbers. At the time, I didn't think I'd ever use these notes, but I 100% thought they would be useful. And it certainly was useful the day before my birthday. I requested my birthday off 2 months in advance by submitting a formal request form and handed it to the assistant manager, who started learning how to make the schedule and left a copy on Johnny's desk. The day before my birthday, Johnny and the assistant manager were looking over the schedule in front of everyone to see who was working the next day, and when he discovered I was off, he asked why. To which the AM replied, "Well, yeah, he requested it a while ago. Didn't you see the form?" Johnny replies with, "Yeah, I did. F that. Request denied, F. You're working tomorrow. Got a problem with it? Turn in your keys now, because if you don't show up, you're fired." I promptly changed into my street clothes, took the key off my key ring, handed it to Johnny, and left. He called me back a few hours later, begging me to come back, but I would still have to work on my birthday. I laughed for a few seconds and hung up. Now it's time for the revenge. I got in contact with someone in the corporate office a few hours away, explained the situation that had occurred in the morning, and gave a few examples of what Johnny was doing wrong at the store. They asked if I could email them everything I had and promised they would look into it. The DM gave me a call, asking if I wanted to work at a different store, but I turned it down, deciding it's time for me to move on. The job made me hate cars and people, so it was time to move on. I didn't hear anything about it for a while, till the guy who's now my best friend calls me laughing hysterically with news about Johnny. Apparently, Johnny had been begging for a raise or a promotion to start training people to become managers, so he would be out of the stores and customer service completely. One day, he got a call from the corporate office to discuss this. He was beyond elated and told everyone who would listen. Turns out that was a lie. They had him drive 3 hours away to sit him down to review footage of the things he's been doing, going over those bogus invoices, and listen to voicemails of customers calling and complaining about getting ripped off. He was immediately fired. Supposedly, the customers that complained that they found had paid for parts that didn't exist on their car or service that couldn't be done did get their money back, but everyone else just got an apology and a few free oil change coupons. Found out he ended up never finding work in the state again and actually ended up moving a few states away. Myself, I ended up in a different industry, working for the state, making way more money with a ton of benefits. Unless Johnny hit the lotto, the winner is me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, be sure to subscribe to find out when new videos come out.